Good morning, traders, and a happy Thursday out there to everyone. Hope that you all had a nice evening there last night, and all geared up here for these markets here in front of us today. Just before we go diving into the charts, just to make note of here, we have the 8:30 figures to take into account today. That's our unemployment claims and our building permits there for the U.S. and the Philly Fed Manufacturing Index. So we have a couple items there in the queue, and then we'll also have the natural gas at 10:30. And since we had the holiday there on Monday, the crude figure will be due out at 11 o'clock, and they are starting to roll into that March series there in the crude. So just a couple things on the housekeeping front to be aware of. I'll drop in the little CME link for the crude just so you can check out the volume shifting over there into the March series. But with that said, a couple items on the calendar to be aware of, and now we can come in here and have our daily charts here of the S&Ps. So far, we have had a fairly nice extension in the overnight session. Still an inside range bar, but we did leave that tail down from yesterday's activity. So closing up off the lows yesterday and now today in the overnight session, trading inside the previous day's bar. And what we'll have coming in here are a few things. One, including that of the 5 SMA, which comes in fairly close there towards that previous day's high. So we have 47.97 as the 5 SMA and the old 4800 there as our previous day's high. So two data points to keep in mind. Should we push up any further from there, we already had our 2 days of high to low activity, so our 2-period rate of change is flipping up after leaving a tail. So it's just a matter that a lot of this low to high activity has already unfolded from the overnight session. So as far as the daily display, 5 SMA, previous day's high will be 2 points of reference there from yesterday's activity. And then coming down here to the 120-minute display, fairly impressive in their nature, right? Leaving the tail. Not necessarily major signs of buy divergences or anything, as we'll see in some of these other groups. But as we come up here in the S&Ps, nice progress. As you can see, up above, this will show up nicely on the market profile display. Just the fact that we had put in a, good amount of congestion, up above, just a little bit above that 4,800 mark. So, like we said, we got that 48 and change, previous day's high. The 5 SMAs, 2 initial points up above. And, if they start to maintain and get further traction, we'd keep an eye on the little congestion zone closer towards like 4805, 4806. But one step at a time. That's where we are on the 120-minute display. Taking into account here what we had unfold in the overnight session, right, during the Asia versus Europe session. If we look at Asia, on the reopening there last night, pretty tame. I would say they even traded sideways, perhaps even mildly down. And then into the Europe session opening, that 2 a.m. to 3 a.m. Eastern, that's where we really started to get some better low to high activity and now started to have some better impulsive action. So, point being, we've really only been up for that Europe session there. So we have an open door going into our, U.S. morning. For now, we are, working on a little bit of loss of momentum on the 5-minute chart, but we've already reverted back to the mean and are holding up just a-okay there. So that's kind of more or less where we're standing with the ES. Good advancement there in the Europe session. Over on the DAX side of the equation, we know that the DAX had a deeper response yesterday, closing below that 16,584. All right, we did leave a tail as well, but couldn't quite close back above that point. So in the overnight as well, DAX catching a bid, just like how we have been in the Europe session. So nice and active in the DAX. However, just like the ES, we got 16,693, fairly close to 17 there. As far as the 5 SMA here on the daily chart for that of the DAX, after having 3 days of high to low it as well, is putting in its first day of low to high, first day up on the 2-period rate of change. Just a matter of the fact that we've put in a lot of that low to high activity during the overnight session. So DAX will keep an eye on that 16,584, see if they're able to maintain themselves up above that at all. And we'll have the hourly chart down on this top left side just to kind of help keep us in tune there with our S&Ps. So not too bad. Further up above, 16,744 would be a little congestion zone there for the DAX, but we'll take it one step at a time. We'll kind of keep an eye, see if we're able to put in any type of higher low, which would be constructive there in the case of that DAX. So that's where we are there. And then moving on along here, we have the currency group here. Also has been quite the interesting one here. Let me get this all set here. So here with the euro currency, we know we had superb range expansion down initially. We had a pause bar yesterday, leaving a bit of a tail, right? So what we have not seen as of yet is any type of higher low, which we'll see on the intraday charts in just a moment. But for now, we have 1.08895, right, as the low from 2 days ago, which would put us right back inside that tail area. So coming back beneath that point, we'd be sitting back inside the tail with the euro currency traded up towards that 5 SMA on the daily chart, but boy oh boy, they just could not quite keep themselves maintained above that. So as far as the daily views, coming back, trading inside of yesterday's range. But this 120-minute view gives us a fairly decent feeling. For one, we'll blow this up just a notch. We know we had been doing some repair work on this impulse bar, same idea that we had in the gold and the bonds, but all else aside, right, partial filling in, which is A-OK, but this rhythm here on the 120-minute data, little loss of momentum or by divergences. However, that also has panned out during the overnight session. So we already had the reversion back to the mean, other side of the 120 EMA. You can see our oscillator had a nice hook back up. So when we come back down, this will be fairly crucial here for the euro currency. If we come back down, can we hold ourselves up with any type of higher low? We can even mark that to be a little bit more specific there, just so we have it there. Our low from yesterday, that tail, 1.08710, a pretty important area there for the euro currency. Should we come down and start to trade through that, we'll have the rest of that big impulse bar to deal with from that far left-hand side. But one step at a time. For now, they're working their way down, but we'll keep an eye. That would be the rest of our low developed area. So that's where we are with the euro currency. And we looked at the dollar in some detail there yesterday. So dollar, continuing on a bit of its mission there as well. So currency groups, not half bad there. And now we'll note some similarities here. We have the gold, 2 days of high to low action, 2-period rate of change, flipping up overnight. However, this gold, not quite the same appearance of loss of momentum like we had on the euro currency, as opposed to major divergences. All we did was just simply come up off of the low. So viewing the 2020 up above as being a bit of a hurdle for the gold. In other words, if they get back above it, we could play inside those previous 2 ranges. But on the other hand, if we cannot quite establish ourselves up above that, we'll have that previous day's low at 2004.6. So already came up, reverted to its 120-minute EMA. So just being cautious in case we get any type of this activity where we roll back down and perhaps do some holding. And then flip side would be as if we came in, since we do have some morning data points there, we have this 2020 up above there to serve us as well there in the gold, but not half bad. Fairly active there in the overnight session. And then we have the crude here. Crude rolling over to the March series here today. Still working with a high degree of price bar overlap on the daily charts. So winding down to a bit of an equilibrium point. Still a good amount of trading around 72.62, this cycle low that we had from that earlier portions of November. So, a lot of closes up above it, then beneath it. So we've been going through that phase quite a bit. That low ADX rating as well as we kind of wind down, converging trend lines in the crude. So for now, we're still range bound, if you would, or a little bit more of the bracketing market mode. So on the 120-minute display, still is in the same camp even after yesterday. These upper ends and lower ends of the ranges have been essentially met with fading activity, and coming into the session, I would be pretty close to saying that we're right in the middle of this broader 120-minute range here as far as this March crude goes. So we'll keep tabs on it. It does have the EIA data there today, the crude number, so we'll see if that shakes it up a notch, but still want to be cautious to come outside of this coil or equilibrium point. We're going to need to see some good volume and some good conviction to get themselves outside of it and hold. So obviously has not been the case as of yet. Therefore, that of the crude. And then lastly here we have the bonds as well. Note again here the 120-minute oscillators. So we had the euro currency, the gold, and the bonds all trading up towards their 120-minute moving average overnight. Here with the bonds, a little bit more similar to that euro currency. Right, here's our EC again. Here's the oscillator, right? Loss of momentum, spring to the EMA. However, in the case of the bonds, a little more timid in their response. In other words, they didn't have as much of a counter-reactive lift like we had there in the EC. So here with the bonds, 120-minute moving average was 121.01. So we already came up reverted to the mean. And then back on these daily charts, remember this 120.25 here. Ooh. Previous cycle high that we had from December 7th and December 6th. So we've come down, we traded beneath that yesterday. And coming into the session, that's also where we're sitting here currently in the case of the bond. So good counter-reactive lift, not really putting in a higher low yet. And then we take the same 120-minute chart, blow it up nice and big here. Right? And we can see this was our previous 120.25 here from the very far left-hand side before getting our big impulse to the upside. So just like the gold and the euro currency, we filled in the blanks from the large impulse from December 13th that we had. So that's where we're standing here in the bonds. Lift to the EMA, not quite forming that higher low as of yet. So we could put a nice yellow line here on that PD low of 120.12. So we'll scale that one back. And then we'll have, once again, we'll dial it back here so we can let our morning data point come out there at 8:30. See what we have lining up for this day in front of us. But some interesting charts on the horizon there. A lot of this similarities on the 120-minute and hourly displays. So we'll get that back up for the ES. Let this data point run its course and see what we have lining up for this nice day in front of us here.